John, how's it going?
Joe, great. How are you?
Good to see you. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about, I think, a lot of things. You have a lot of things in your mind regarding semantics and data products and so forth. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. Hey, my name is John O'Gorman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a early stage startup called Semantium. I've been around the data business for quite some time now. Back in my university days, we were using Hollerith cards, and for those of your listeners that don't know what those are, the little punch cards that
Mm.
you fed into a computer with a computer scientist with a white lab coat standing behind the counter going, "Is this all you have?" And so you would respectfully hand your deck of cards to the guy in the back there, and he would tell you to come back the next day after he processed them. So um, yeah,
Were
my
you the guy? Were
background
you the
goes.
guy in the lab coat, or were you
No,
the
I
guy
was
that had punch
I was the
cards?
supplicant on the other side of the counter.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's been kind of an interesting journey for me because the first computer I had was an IBM XT, total 64K RAM and a 10 megabyte hard drive. So that's kind of how I got started. Um, yeah, and since then I've touched almost every aspect of data management, with the exception of development. I started doing a bit of development early, but realized that I had a way more fun on the data side of the business, and to that end, became kind of a translator between technology and data for businesses. That's what I typically do, is business analysis. And we've developed this model that started out as a classification protocol called Q6, based on Rudyard Kipling's Six Honest Serving Men. He can send them out everywhere and they can answer all these questions. So the who, what, when, where, why, and how was the starting point. Um, did some very, very early days business analysis with a local university here, and then went down to the San Francisco Bay Area working with content management and pretty much everything in between.
Interesting. Walk me through some of the early days of translating data to the business. I got to imagine you were one of the first people doing this if you're doing it that far back.
Yeah, so it really started in earnest, Joe, with the Mount Royal College. It's called Mount Royal University now. My job there was as an analyst in the president's division of a department called the Department of Institutional Analysis and Planning, or the organization OIAP. The problem they were having back then, this was in the late 80s, was it was taking them 4 to 5 months to get their quarterly reports done.
Oh, so like a
And
quarter to get your quarterly report.
yeah, and so they're constantly running behind, right? And they were expected to do some very complicated analysis work on things like longitudinal graduate analysis, things like that. So from cradle to grave, when they started with the college, from the time they got their first job, that kind of thing. So where we started with that was because they were using a whole bunch of different techs, like everything from, believe it or not, the disks, the floppy disks, and insert this in the application B and blah. It was all an integration thing. So we took all of their operational data stores and we performed something we later called data liquefaction. So in
Interesting.
the extracts, we're using SPSS, and we liquefied all of their operational data stores, and then we put them back together to formulate this. And keep in mind, we're using green screens and Excel here to do this kind of work.
Whoa.
And so all of the student applications, so the student registry, the workflows for instructors, finance was part of it, HR was part of it. Essentially, I think we found 7 different applications that we wanted to get information from. Once we got them into SPSS, which was our only sort of, I would call it at that point, sort of semi-muscular tool to use, we started seeing these patterns emerge where the people, places, things, activities, status, all of those facets of this organization started to surface. So what we did was we started to do what I guess you would call now data mapping. So, for example, on the fine or the facility utilization thing application, the course numbers and the room numbers were different than they were on the calendar side. So we did the mapping. We created these equivalents, we call them, and we mapped them, and then we massaged the data. We cleaned it up. We did all of the usual things that are done now, sort of in an ETL environment, and we created the first, as I say, the first kind of nascent sort of data analytics slash data warehouse type of thing with all of the data that we had. So once we saw these patterns start to emerge, we could create things like longitudinal activity-based costing. So what we decided to deliver to, and it took a little bit of education for us, between us and the chief executive officer level, but what we decided to do was we said, well, what if we made the unit of production for a college, or for this kind of analysis, a seat in a course? The seat has general and administrative overhead, like not direct cost. It has direct cost of instruction, et cetera, et cetera. On the offset side, and I sound like an accountant, but we worked actually quite a bit with finance. So the offset was the revenue that the student brought in terms of tuition fees, plus what the government was giving us. Right? So now if we have an empty seat, costs us money. A full seat brings in revenue from two sides, and then we can track those seats in programs. So the net effect of all of this was we were able to do the first longitudinal activity-based costing per program, per seat, per course in Western Canada. And then, so that was kind of where it started. The real epiphany for me on this approach, Joe, was when I went to California and started working with a company in Texas called BMC Software on the tech pub side. So the company I worked for in California was a document management company, now part of Documentum, now part of another large document management company. The metadata that they used to try to track content, and it was very sort of essentially the architecture, and I don't think it's changed much, is a database sits underneath and a file store sits on top, and you connect, right, metadata. The patterns of classification for the metadata exactly match the patterns of classification for the analytics. So if you're thinking about a data warehousing situation, the things that most businesses want to know is, to your point, to your remarks in the DevOps conference keynote, how many customers do we have? What products did our customers buy? When did they buy them? Where did they buy them? That's et cetera, et cetera. The who, what, when, where, why, and how form the basis of the analytics. The who, what, when, where, why on the content side was basically who authored it, where is it stored, who is it aimed at, all of those kinds of things, which led to the next part was, what if these facets of this data / document management environment were global? So everything in the tech management thing was aimed at products, digital products. They had a lot of different variables. They had to publish content for the current product, plus 3 previous products, plus versions of the next product. And we started to apply these facets, and it all turned out pretty much the same. So Q6 Quantum Semantics is my company now that I own, in addition to the Semantium. Quantum Semantics proposition was, if you start to classify and identify and associate language values as your upstream activity, then the midstream activity of aligning those things up with the rest of the applications, the data in applications, and then the downstream activity of analytics make way more sense. And that was 35 years ago. I've been working with, and of course, in the middle of now and then was a family, getting married, having 2 kids, raising 3 dogs, building a house. I used to build log houses for a living. So while we were doing all of this cool stuff and the data thing, I was busy chopping wood and cutting out windows in a log house up on a hill. So, yeah, wow. And so that's when Semantium was born. And in between then and there, I met Ruben Sardarian, my partner out of Armenia / Burlington, Ontario, who has the wherewithal to start putting all of these really cool ideas. I mean, all our babies are cool, right? All our pet projects are cool, into a knowledge graph. So yeah, that's kind of where we are now. I've worked in the 30 sort of intervening years, I've worked in 7 different verticals, from manufacturing, education, healthcare. There's a bunch of different ones. I have 19 facets now in the model, the classification model. I haven't found facet number 20 yet.
What's a facet for the
Um,
audience out there? And maybe
Great
kind of
question.
back up and
Sure.
maybe talk about some of the basics of semantics too, because I feel like this is an area where um, a lot of data professionals, especially maybe younger ones listening to this podcast, may not be aware of. I think of some of the basics of semantics. Maybe you can quickly walk through that as well as
Yep.
facets.
Yep, sure. So first things first, semantics is essentially the meaning of words, the meaning of phrases, the meaning of paragraphs. So semantics is closely tied to meaning. And some people say it's exactly equivalent to meaning, right? So whereas, for example, an index, where this comes in handy. So just back up a little bit. So in the English language, and I imagine in different languages around the world, some words, some identical words like file, for example, have multiple meanings, right?
Right.
So file can be a verb, file can be a noun, file can refer to a piece of steel that scrapes off the surface of, right? File can refer to something that you either digital or hard copy that you put into a filing cabinet. So file is the act of filing stuff off of like filing wood or filing a skate, or file can mean putting what is a file into a filing cabinet. So the semantics basically starts to deal with the idea that you can have the same word for multiple meanings. The flip side of that semantics is that you can have different words for the same thing. So garbanzo beans and I'm going to get this wrong because I always get caught up in this. Chickpeas. They're the different names for the same thing. This comes in really handy when you do translations. So at BMC, they had to translate all of their content into 7 different languages. What they needed to keep track of was a help topic, for example, like how to install da 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 in English, is semantically equivalent, has exactly the same meaning as a French translation of that topic. You can't do an MD5 hash, like you can't compare them digitally because they don't match.
Right.
But what you do is you can create a relationship between those 2 files that say file X in English is exactly semantically equivalent to file X in French, right? In which case it's not file X anymore, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So semantics is all about meaning. The really difficult part when I started content management was full text indexing only dealt with the shape of the word. So file is file is file, which leads to some really frustrating search experiences where, for example, I'm a new hire at a financial services company and I want to know what the acronym CFA means. So if you were doing this search in, for example, SharePoint, SharePoint would say, "Yep, I found CFA, 1,800 versions of 1,800 instances of it. Go fill your boots and do whatever you want." Okay, that's not really very helpful. So what Semantium does is to say, "Oh yeah, I found CFA. I have in this company, I have 5 of them, and here they are listed in a graph. Which one of these are you interested in?" And you go and navigate into the graph from there. So the semantic part of that says acronyms have meaning. The expansion of acronyms have meaning as well, or they point to an entity like a company or a role or whatever. And then you can also go deeper into content that the company has about, for example, if CFA stood for Canadian Franchise Agreement, you could get an expansion and say, "Oh yeah, that's the context I'm interested in, is Canadian Franchise Agreement. It's a file type in this particular company. And oh, by the way, there's 1,400 of them, some old, some new, some in progress, that refer to the agreements that this company establishes between franchisees and the parent company." Wow, that should be like a no-brainer, right? So semantics is all about meaning. A facet is a dimension of classification. So what I mean by that is a person facet is separate from a role facet. So in my case, John O'Gorman fits into the person facet, full stop. and I can give me certain attributes that qualify me as a member of that set or class or category. And I know I'm going to blow some purist minds. You can't call it a set and you can't call it a category at the same time. I say it's a collection of things with identical or similar properties. So John O'Gorman, Joe Reese fit into the person facet. Um, Author is a role. Business analyst is a role. Those are part of the role facets. So Joe Reese is an author. John O'Gorman is a business analyst, right? So you can see, so the idea here is separation of concerns. So if I wanted to extend that for a minute into a data modeling perspective, when I take care of the granular bits like author and business analyst and physician and teacher, etc., as roles, and I can say what those capabilities are that make those members of that facet, I can start to draw graphs between nodes, and I'm skipping around a bunch of stuff. Hopefully that people are following, but I can, if Joe Reese is a node, John O'Gorman is a node in an enterprise knowledge graph, I can connect one Joe Reese to multiple roles.
Right.
Right. And so I'm not too worried about, normalization. I'm not too worried about any of the physical things that I normally would have to worry about. I'm just saying, for the sake of knowledge representation, that separation of concerns gives you all kinds of flexibility in terms of what you can describe in your business.
It's really fascinating. How, so I work with a lot of companies, and I'm sure you do too. And this is one of those areas where I feel like knowledge representation, having a knowledge graph for your business, it still feels like it's a foreign concept to a lot of data teams for whatever reason. But I think it's something that you hit on early in your career, where it's having this. Being able to associate language values, for example, upstream, meant that analysis is much simpler. Why do you think there's this disconnect?
That's a great question. I think that without being too pejorative about it, and I was got a great chuckles out of your DevOps keynote, because it was sort of saying that shift left, shift right. The idea that the DevOps team and the data teams and stuff are sitting in separate, what Marshall McLuhan used to call like separate realities, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the shit flows downhill, pardon my French, but that's what happens, right? So there's this big disconnect there. And I think most companies rely on their DevOps team to give them the structure and how data goes together. I think an enterprise knowledge graph is still a very new concept, but I think the impression is that it's not muscular enough to handle all of the things that go on in a company data-wise. That it's something like, it's like a mind map. It's kind of cool, it makes pretty connections, but there's no math and there's no it's not robust enough to manage like day-to-day ops, which is starting to become less and less true every day, right? Like companies, most people don't know, for example, or maybe a lot of people don't know that Google, for example, is powered on a knowledge graph, has been since 2012. Amazon is powered on knowledge graphs. So I think the perception out there is it's kind of like an academic exercise. What's missing, I think, and I believe this, and this is why we started up Semantium, is a little bit of education into the idea that guardrails like 19 classes, so you have to put everything in the company in 19 buckets. And it can only be in one bucket. So Joe Reese can be in the person bucket, and you can't be anywhere else. You can't be in the knowledge, you can't be, say, in a data engineer bucket, because you can connect those two ideas, right? But you only belong in one class, period. The other one that comes up in the deck that I sent you about the YYC DataCon was, and in support of the grocery metaphor that I've used, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is the idea that once in a bucket, you have to stay there, right? That you're classified. I lost my train of thought a little bit, Joe, but I'll get it back. Okay. So I think the idea that the guardrail, second part of the guardrail was that every node in a Semantium knowledge graph has exactly the same properties. So this is kind of speaking to the UPC code has exactly, it's a standard thing, right?
Right.
So whereas someone might be tempted to put different properties on a person node and different properties on a role node, like business analyst, Semantium puts the same properties on every node. So I think what's required, I think, to get enterprise knowledge graphs a little bit more off the ground, a little more elevated, a little more visible, is the idea that you can apply the same mathematical robustness to knowledge graphs as you apply to, for example, relational database or XML or JSON or any of those other ones. And it kind of takes a little bit of the Wild West out of classification and out of attribution. And then the other constraint is one more constraint. Most knowledge graphs allow you to create any kind of connection you want in the middle. So again, for folks who are not familiar with the concept, in RDF, you have a subject node, you have a predicate node, which is the connector in the middle, and then you have an object node on the other side. So reading left to right, it's subject, predicate, object. In most knowledge graph or most even RDF or whatever, anybody designing a knowledge graph can put whatever they want in the middle. So John O'Gorman knows Joe Reese. And I was asked to ask you a question at the beginning of the topic as how you pronounce your last name. Is it Reese or Rice?
It's either one, but in America, it's Reese.
There you
People
go.
tend to confuse me either with German or Portuguese, and so,
Okay.
so I go with neither. So,
Excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's basically putting some guardrails on knowledge graph modeling. When you do data modeling, when you do or you do an enterprise conceptual model, those constraints come in really handy because you can only make certain statements about certain things. And when people on the business side see their business modeled that way, it's such a simple one-page, one-shot kind of, oh, yeah, that's what we do. Okay, that's cool.
right.
And it doesn't take very long. So, for example, one of our MVP testers, we modeled her mergers and acquisition business in the advertising and marketing space in 2 days. And again, it's high level, it's highly constrained. So we're not getting things like cardinality and all of those kinds of interesting things that you'd find at a logical level and a physical level.
Right.
But conceptually, she shows that model to the whole business and they all nod and go, yeah, we do that. We have these kinds of business running that part. And then we have these acquisitions coming in that we assess their data. And so one of the quotes we love to use from the CDO's perspective is she said, I can see things now in a matter of minutes that used to take me days or weeks.
That's really interesting.
Because here's the other kicker. Sorry, Joel, just to finish this up. The other kicker is the reason that she can see that is because once we get the conceptual landscape drawn out, then we connect. And again, I loved your comment about customers. That got quite a rise out of the audience. But so now we can create a concept or we can connect a concept like customer, client, or guest, or whatever it happens to be, to the metadata that manages that concept for the business. So in her case, every time she has a new acquisition, she gets new metadata. She takes the metadata that she already has mapped and looks at the new acquisition metadata and says, oh, they're treating their column name for customer in their particular application is C-NM. So we make a semantic connection between the metadata. Ours says CUST_NAM to C-NM. And now they're semantically equivalent. So every time you see either one of those, right, you're actually relating to a concept called customer. And likewise, in the instance data, so this is the 3-layer model that's in the deck that I sent. On the instance layer, they could be storing customer name in 3 different fields: first name, middle name, last name. They could be storing customer as one name, John O'Gorman, and the apostrophe screws up systems still to this day, or they could just say, they could list their customer as O'Gorman, J. We make semantic equivalence between those 3 instances and say, whenever you see one of those 3 nodes, they're semantically equivalent and will connect to whatever applications are using those 3 instances.
This kind of brings to mind how. So there's this other area, master data management, for example, that tries to come up with the canonically golden records and so forth. Like how similar or different is this from what MDM tries to accomplish?
Yeah, it's the similarity is as I described. So if John O'Gorman is the preferred way of spelling a customer's name, like dealing with a customer's name, notwithstanding the apostrophe issue, I could rant on about that for a long time, but that's just the way the world works. My bank,
Yep.
I've been dealing with my bank for 35 years. They still don't know how to find O'Gorman with apostrophe in it, but be that as may.
Well, at
So
least you
what
don't
we
have a
have in
comma
common,
in your name. That would suck too.
yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly, or some kind of other illegal character.
yeah.
Yeah, so they're alike in the fact that what we're trying to do and what we're attempting to do is to get a certain preferred, if you will, high quality customer name, or any other, like Toronto is spelled Tronto. It's probably not pronounced that way, but you get what I understand, what I mean. So in that way, it's very, very similar. The difference is that we make the master data available in a graph as a matter of course. It's not hidden somewhere in an application. It's not something that people have to look up. They can, if they're doing something like creating a new customer record to see if they have a customer named John O'Gorman, there's a whole other at least an hour's worth of talk about how we manage Jack Johnson, of which there's like 100,000 in the United States, for example. That's a whole different. We get into hypergraphs and hypernodes. That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, so the likeness is that we're trying to get to that thing about this is the preferred high quality. This is high quality data point. But we're different in that knowledge graphs makes everything visible, potentially visible, all the time. The concept of equivalence works really well with internationalization as well, Joe. Because, for example, in Canada, being bilingual, if you're looking up, if you're living in Montreal and you speak French and you're looking up an English value, we can find the English value, then switch you over to the French language equivalents, right? And I know that, that everybody said, well, gee, that's old. I mean, you just hit a button, an icon that says that you want to speak French or you want to do English. The difference is now you can go back and forth between English and French on a semantic level, not just on a string level.
That's really interesting. And to kind of tie it back to, we were chatting right before we started recording. You have this notion of digital data products,
Right.
and UPC codes, and we were talking about how that kind of intersects with things like data mesh and so forth. So let's dive into that whole can of worms
Sure.
there. So,
Yeah.
first, before we dive in, how do you define a data product? It's a term that's used a lot these days. I'm not sure that there's a consensus on what exactly a data product is. So how would you define it?
Yeah, great question. So I think the initial kind of concept was a data product is a collection of facts and figures that are analytics ready. So they can be shipped out as a self-contained kind of collection of things that someone in the organization can use either as standalone analytics or as part of a sort of composite analytics. So if I use a grocery store metaphor like we did at YYC DataCon this year, this would be something like analogous to a frozen pizza. So you have pizza has all of these ingredients that I can say, okay, I'm going to analyze all the ingredients in the pizza in my great big stack of pizzas, and I'm going to come up with some really interesting insights. So that's one concept of data product. And to that end, if you have a pizza department and you know all the ingredients that go into your pizza, that's your data product. That's your domain is pizzas. However, I think what's going to start to happen is that people are going to realize that if they want to fold in things like data quality and data governance and data lineage, you should kind of know where the ingredients of the pizza are coming from. So in Semantium's view, a data product is anything that has been um, classified, identified, and associated at any level of granularity for consumption by or distribution for analytics. So in a grocery store, if they said, well, you can't buy a tomato, you can't buy pepperoni, you can't buy cheese, you can't buy crust or flour or butter or milk or tomato paste, you have to buy a pizza. He said, well, I don't want a pizza. I just need a list of tomatoes.
Right.
Or I just want, how many brands of pepperoni do you have? So I think data product is going to become more granular. And I think the discipline required to make data products semantically interoperable, which has not happened yet as far as I can see, you have to have some discipline around production, quality, labeling, all of those kinds of things have to come into play.
So would it be similar then to how in manufacturing you have a like a bill of materials, for example, right? That goes into a product. Would that be kind of equivalent? Okay.
Absolutely. And I think, like a pizza box will tell you what's in the product, but it doesn't tell you where it comes from. So
Right.
if you have in manufacturing or, supply chain, we talked about that briefly as well, right? The idea again is that all of these things are important. And, I do a little bit of community theater stuff, or used to anyways.
That's cool.
There are no small parts. So if Zamek's vision is going to be realized, data mesh folks have to figure out a way to get beyond the domain idea upstream of data product delivery and say, okay, why not have quality tomatoes? The thing is, I can use lower quality tomatoes if I can't sell them. This is a classic North American, Western European problem with food waste. This is a bit of a divergent, but I think it fits. It's really difficult to sell a mushy tomato.
Right.
But mushy tomatoes make the best tomato sauce. So, you think about reuse and you think about like, okay, so how would I use this lesser quality stuff? Or if I don't want to have all those ingredients in a pizza, some people, inexplicably to me, but just buy cheese pizza. All right, if you just want cheese on a pizza, that's fine with me, but you know what I mean? So you need some more degrees of freedom on one side and you need more discipline on the other to say, what I'm delivering is mozzarella cheese. Put it on your pizza, fill your boots. But this is where it came from. This is who made it. This is our quality guarantee, sort of an SLA, service level agreement type of thing. And then it makes more sense. In manufacturing, take an airplane. You can't just throw anything over the wall building an airplane. There are specs, there are identifiers, there are all kinds of very robust kind of things. You say, well, an airplane's different than a database, and say, well, maybe it shouldn't be.
That's really interesting. And it kind of back a couple minutes too. You talked about domains. So when you say domain, are you referring to the domain that's used in maybe domain-driven design? Is that the type of domain you're referring to, or?
Yeah. Okay. Semantics is really interesting, right, Joe? Because I say potato, you say potato, I say domain, and you go, oh, I know what that is. And then you go, well, wait a minute, he's not talking about domains at all. It's kind of like the word integration.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So all of these huge vendors, like I was at, and I think I posted this on LinkedIn, I was at the Data for Breakfast conference in Calgary a month and a half ago. And I just asked a simple question of the Snowflake folks. I was like, okay, so how do you guys define semantic interoperability? And do you have it? And it turns out they don't really. But they were quite. The response to my question was kind of like crickets, and then a sort of a groan from one of the panelists at the front. Oh, here's a guy talking about semantic interoperability. He's like an egghead, looks like an egghead. He's probably an academic. But domains to me, it's a really, really slippery really slippery word, because domain to Zamak sort of means, I think, and I don't want to speak for her because, obviously she might have a different idea, but when people say domains, they think of organization unit. Like an org unit like HR should have a handle on its data products. An organization like finance or product development or marketing or take your pick, right? Domain to me just means a subject of interest. Full stop.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So if you're interested, for example, again, if you're one of those people that sweats nickels over quality addresses, that's your domain. You should be in the center of your business going, I sell high quality addresses. Anybody want one? Yeah, that's a domain. And that's something I think, again, to the tomato thing. Um, if you sell tomatoes and you can sell any kind of like minced potatoes, mashed potatoes, cubed tomatoes, diced tomatoes, all of that kind of stuff, tomatoes is that's your thing. That's your domain. And lots of people can use them, but they need to know that, if I'm selling tomatoes, John O'Gorman sells the best quality tomatoes, or let's call it the fit for purpose tomatoes. If you want to, throw a tomato at someone you don't like their performance on stage, that's up to you. You can do with it. Once I release it to you, that's your business. But again, you're right on the nose about manufacturing, Joe. I think I think as a community, data management needs to get a little bit more robust about that kind of thing. And
it certainly does.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because the concept of domains, Larry Burns had a whole 4 series articles on TDAN about the just sort of how domain-driven development, as he called it, also known as domain-driven design, as Eric Evans describes it. But how it applies to developers isn't exactly how it applies to domain or to data, right? So
yeah, again, your gap, right?
What's that?
Again, your gap.
Yeah, it's a gap, right? And so, because he brings up the whole point that just different words mean different things in different domains, and if you're trying to share data amongst these domains, this becomes an acutely difficult problem. And so, with data mesh, for example, sharing data products, within organizations is hard enough. Now, try sharing them across between different organizations, between different companies, and this is, I think, where your supply chain metaphor is very interesting in your tomato one, where this is how the world of manufacturing and supply chain has operated for forever, really. It's just, I sell tomatoes to you. Maybe I sell them internally. Maybe I sell them, all over the world. And so, but as you point out with the UPC thing too, that's sort of the nature of it, where this provides maybe a universally identifiable way of trading, products and subcomponents of data products as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And herein lies the issue too. Jacques a good friend of mine, and but I think these are some of the areas that I can't say too much, but this is one of this. As far as I can tell, this seems to be one of the sticking points. At least it is for me mentally. When I think about how this is going to work, being able to share, and you mentioned semantic interoperability, right? And so on Snowflake's platform, for example, you can do data sharing. What exactly does that mean, and how does that work with respect to semantic interoperability? I don't know.
Right. So. Well, they talk. Yeah, exactly. And on the last, there's been a series of comments and posts on a unified semantic layer. And I thought it was just one company that had this idea, but it turns out like there's 8 or 10 of them has a unified semantic layer, none of which talk to each other, by the way. But but it's essentially when most companies talk about a unified semantic layer, they're talking about integration. And so integration to them, and again, to your point about devs and data people, devs are pumps and pipes. Data are more like, water and whatever else might be flowing through the pipes of any value, right? So if you're in a bar and you're drawing a pint of Guinness out, the tap is full of Guinness, and the dev guys go, it's all about the tap, it's all about the piping going in the tap, it's all about the keg, it's all about the hardware. So they don't care. Again, you asked the audience at that same conference, does anybody care about data? And about 3 hands went up. I don't know how many people.
Pretty shocking.
I was just going to say the same thing. That's shocking that still happens, right? So I think to the data mesh folks, I would say you need to somehow move the needle. If that's, I'm mixing metaphors, sorry, but you need to move the focus upstream. So what Semantium suggests is that we have a universal product code, like a universal identifier for product codes that works really well. We have a fixed number of classes that works really well. If we could get applications developers to think of this idea more of, I'm shopping for things in a core. So think about a giant space station with a core in the middle and ramps running into the outside. So the Semantium core is comprised of of concepts, and then around that would be metadata, and around that would be, and I've got a graphic in that deck, around that would be instance data. It's highly granular, very fluid, highly controlled, and semantically connected. So in the beginning, all of these legacy applications that have, to your point earlier again, that carry data in their applications would end up, if they qualify, would end up in the core. And then the applications that currently exist would only contain data and information relevant to the performance of that application. They would, by services or microservices or whatever you want, reference common data in the core. So the architecture is what Dave McComb describes as data-centric, but not all the data lives in the middle.
I'm staring at his book right over there, actually. So
yeah, I mean,
I think that's actually how we met, because you had,
yes.
had as a side thing. Yeah, I think you were commenting on one of my live streams, and you mentioned data centric, and I was like, okay, who's this guy? Because nobody knows about this book except for like a handful of.
That's right. That's exactly how we met.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think the data centric idea is a really good place to do things like translations, and, you find something that leads to something else. So, and again, the security model for that, if you think about all the PII that's contained in a human resources application, if I worked for Semantic Arts and I need to know who my boss is, or who Dave McComb is, hopefully I'd know that before I get hired. But if I need to go to the core to find Dave McComb and maybe a couple of interesting little facts about Dave, but I'm not allowed to traverse out to the human resources because that's where Dave's address is, his salary is, all of those kind of things. So that's the kind of thing that data-centric thinking with the Semantium Foundation kind of engenders, is this whole kind of a North Star kind of thing, is where that's kind of our future. That's part of our roadmap is data centricity, where you can access the core, and you have a certain amount of chips, how far you can get out towards the satellites.
It needs to happen. I was writing about this morning, actually, in my book, and it's just sort of the whole data life cycle. Really, when you talk about data being created, like that's. I think that's where you have a chance to make a big difference in the world. It's also where everything can sort of go to pot too if you're not paying attention. So
that's true. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Because as everything kind of goes downhill, or downstream, it's not like data gets better, right? I mean, it can only get worse. Yeah. And so by the time it hits analysts, I mean, this has been the classic problem, with analytics from day one, is that you're dealing with whatever data you've been given, and for the most part, it isn't quote data centric, and there isn't a lot of thought into it. Especially now, when you develop applications, it's so easy to throw whatever you want into a quote data model. It's not really a formal one, but it's a way of representing data, and hence it's a model. It's kind of a crappy one, but it still is a model. Yeah. But that's what everyone gets to deal with now. So it's analysts and machine learning. We were talking about this in LinkedIn, but it's like, ML's the other one, where that now you have an algorithm looking at it. It's not even a human, and trying to make sense of all this data.
Trying to make sense of it.
Yeah. So this is it's a giant problem. Huge problem.
It really, really is, and it's one that we've been struggling with for a long time in the data management industry, if you will. The whole concept of doing transformations on the downstream level is hugely expensive. This is another one of Dave's. It's just sucking the life out of a lot of companies, right? If you can do transformations in the core, so there's this idea like that it's the data quality thing, or quality anything thing, is if you spend $1 doing it upstream, it's you save $9 instead of doing it midstream, and you save $99 instead of doing it on the downstream. So one of the things that we've been discussing on LinkedIn is ETL dead? Well, if it's not dead, it should be pretty soon, because to your point, if you've got one guy, one cowboy, and I mean, some of the people that I worked with, in the best sense of the word, collaborating with, are developers, and and the guys like the data architects and the technical folks, because I'm not technical. I'm more on the linguistic side of business. That's
Mm,
where I live. But if you have one guy, one cowboy doing development and like you say, throwing whatever data model he thinks is valuable, the guy next to him is building a data model that's going to be direct conflict with him, like
yeah.
literally in the next desk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's time for a little bit of some guardrails, but they can't be. It can't be yet another standard. It has to be understandable by the business and has to be implementable by
Yeah.
the technical folks.
Absolutely. And I think this is if anything's happening right now, I feel like it's and I feel like it's just starting, but the discussions around how developers and data can work better together is I think
Yes.
this is starting to happen, which is awesome. Data mesh is definitely, I think, helping with the discussion. I mean, Jim she's a
Mm-hmm.
developer; she's not a data person. No, she'd be the first to admit that she comes from a software background. I think that's maybe the sort of lens that was needed in some cases to sort of blow the door open on this. Because data people, we like to talk to each other about data stuff, and that's what we're good at. Devs talk to each other about dev stuff, but these worlds
Yeah.
don't intersect. I mean, I'm in a number of Slack groups, with a lot of software engineers, and we talk shop a lot, but the data is still a very foreign concept to them, even though they're responsible for generating it every day and work with it every day.
Yeah.
It's but you talk about,
Yeah.
I was talking about this yesterday with my friend Todd, who's one of the best software engineers I know, and he's just like there's almost a weird disdain in some ways for quote data people if you're in the
Oh, I know.
software area. So it's like, oh, what are
Yeah,
these
and I
guys
think
doing?
yeah, exactly. And I think that came out. I know you were talking to mostly a DevOps audience, but that sort of came out in a couple of comments, and that we
Yeah,
don't really have any time for those folks because all they do is yap yap yap, and there doesn't seem they can't build anything.
yeah,
They're like literally they're on the downstream side talking about the low quality of the yada yada yada. I think what needs to happen to start to rectify that is not only on the collaborative end, but I think data people need to start building these knowledge graphs using, and I know we're not shilling too much, but Semantium as a foundation or
yeah,
this idea of data centric, and start building applications that demonstrate to a business how easy it is when you have semantics upstream.
yep. It's hugely important.
Yeah.
Especially now, the other thing that I think, that we're now all talking about, that we weren't talking about a few months ago, is just generative AI, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so Chat GPT and so forth. And now businesses want to start applying this to their own internal data. And I'm like, I mean, do you have data that you can do that with? And if you do, is it any good, right? And so do you even understand
Yeah.
what you have? Like this is going
Right.
to be kind of bananas pretty soon. So
Yeah. You have to eat your vegetables, Joe. This is
tomatoes are
the hard
fruit.
part
No,
of
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah. No. Good
I'm
point.
just
But
kidding.
again, nobody likes that sort of like. So ChatGPT is the sexiest thing to hit, and everybody's just blown. Everybody's mind is blown by the potential of it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to vegetables. It comes down
Yeah.
to you have to have some discipline to feed it something.
Yeah.
You can't feed it rocks and twigs and a couple of couple of peaches thrown in, because that just won't cut it. So we're developing this concept called, and you'll hear it here first, I think, is enterprise language models, where the concepts of Chat GPT and generative applications are married in a hybrid kind of way with this high discipline, highly kind of I don't like the word controlled or that all that kind of stuff, but it's highly disciplined way of dealing with the language of the business and how it connects to the next thing and how it
Mm,
connects to the next thing. Because, and I think, also data folks are responsible for learning a little bit about what DevOps, and it goes like to your point later in your presentation. There's an arrow going both ways. Learning the challenges of DevOps. What's it like to be a DevOps guy or girl? Right. And they need to learn what the challenges are of sitting downstream and all this shit's
yeah.
flowing over the fence going, yeah, this will do. Right. And go, no, 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 it won't. Then you drown in it and stuff. And then you're dead or you're burned out or whatever. So, I mean, it's great for, on the flip side of that, it's great for, career. If your career is just dealing with stuff all day, and that's what you like to do, then you're set for life, really. But
Hmm.
we're sort of invested more into saying, to Ruben's point, we need to make this more elegant, not more complex.
Mm,
And the elegance is find a good metaphor like a restaurant or food prep, or take your pick, or manufacturing, or that kind of thing, and say what we really count on to make all this stuff work is quality upstream materials.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can do some, because when you think about it, the English alphabet, the periodic table, DNA is a great example. Like, there's 4 bases in combination make every living thing in the universe as far as we know. So there's 4 bases, there's 26 letters, and there's 90 usable elements in the periodic table. And you can build anything you want, but you can't invent your own elements. You can't invent your own letters. Well, you could, I guess, but no one would know what they meant, which isn't too far from some of the databases I've seen. But you have to stick to those. You have to stick to those guardrails, right? The laws of physics aren't going to change anytime soon. So nor chemistry, nor biochemistry, or whatever. So find a little discipline upstream. And to Dave's point, I mean, there's a line in his book. He said when you do data centric properly with an upper level ontology like GIST or Semantium, analytics practically fall onto the floor. Like, they don't require much effort at all, which is entirely the opposite. Most people might listening to this and going, "Yeah, I'm going to call bullshit on that," but it's true, because the discipline required to build an interstellar or an interplanetary spacecraft requires an engineering mindset that says every single thing we put into this vehicle has to be perfect. Full stop. That's what NASA's all about. That's what Elon Musk is all about, right? That's how he gets things done quickly. He said, "I want the best possible materials in this thing from the get-go." So, yeah. And that's kind of my soapboxy thing. But again, I think what's been missing is a very straightforward set of tools to make it happen. To find, like, for example, we set up an acronym finder for a fintech company. That's all they wanted. They had something like 680 acronyms. And it was like, whoa, we can find acronyms now on a knowledge graph. That's really cool. Thanks very much. It cost like $3,000. So, wow. Okay. It's all about visibility, right? So, okay, now you're getting me worked up. It's time for me to go grab a coffee or something. But that's what it's all about for us, is visibility and predictability and discipline. So there we are.
That's super cool. Awesome. We're coming up on time. Fun conversation. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe I'll get you on the Monday morning data chat. We can talk about
that'd be cool.
Yeah. It's a different beast. It's live, and
people. Yeah, you and Matt make a great team. Yeah. Tomatoes. We'll leave the tomatoes. Yeah.
But we had to. I had to do this podcast because we were booked until August in the show. But we'll get a spot on you for you on that other one. But
sure.
Yeah, anytime. So for people who want to learn more about you and Semantium, how can they do that?
We have a Semantium.io website, and you can contact me anytime on LinkedIn. Cool. It's even got the apostrophe in the name and everything else. So. Oh boy.
So, yeah. Are you on any other social media or just LinkedIn?
No, being a little bit ADH myself, So your listeners might be interested. I don't have a phone.
No way.
I have a flip phone for the same reasons, because if I had a data plan, I'd be like, "Oh, this is really cool. Oh, that's really neat. Oh, I like that." I never get anything done. So I decided to stay old school, and apparently they're making a comeback now, Joe. So I might be cool once again.
Oh no, I see people using flip phones. In fact, when I was in Tokyo a few years ago, pre-COVID, and I think like maybe a third of the businessmen all had flip phones.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes
I think it's because the battery life is a lot longer than a smartphone.
Yeah.
So, and everyone just works themselves to death over there. So I think that was one of the big reasons. You could stay on the phone longer.
Yeah. The other reason here in Canada is data plans are like gold. They're so expensive here. It's just nuts. Yeah. I think we have the second highest data plan costs in the world in Canada.
What? That's crazy.
I know. Yeah. It's crazy. So there again. There it is, all good.
Yeah, I think I pay like $95 US a month for T-Mobile, and I get unlimited data, and I get international data if I go overseas, like 5 gigs or something. So it's like, the concept of data. I don't know. I'm like, I just stream everything, very promiscuously. It's like, I don't know. Can I use my data plan for this? Let's do this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
but I
for
do
sure.
understand what you mean by the like there's a lot of times when I actually delete Slack and LinkedIn off my phone and any social apps because it's such a huge distraction. So
Well, you have something in the north of 40,000 followers now, right? And I
almost
can't
41,
imagine.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can't imagine what that would be like. I think I have 1,400. So, and that keeps me busy, but it also is a distraction. So
It's a big
keeps me for thinking
distraction.
deep thoughts. But
Yeah,
anyway, that's all good.
it's all good.
This has been a
Awesome.
pleasure, Joe. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
likewise. Yeah, anytime, man. Good to have you on the show, and love to chat again. So awesome.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye now.
you.